It's a mailbag part 2, the show where you take control of the content. We answer questions from you. Today, it'll be regarding the core four, the Leafs free agent class, trade proposals, and so much more. All that coming up on today's edition of Locked On Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano from TSN, also my guy, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet. We're doing a part 2 of our mailbag. If you missed part 1 yesterday, go ahead, check it out. We answered a bunch of questions, and we'll continue with the answers today. We asked you on YouTube, we asked in the Discord, and we tossed out on Twitter, and we got answers from all 3 platforms and questions from you guys. So we're going to answer those right now. Dave, let's find another question that we want to toss up here and get the people some answers. Whose question do we want to answer first on our part 2 edition of the mailbag? What's it going to be?
All right, so Rick Bangle from YouTube. I'll preempt this one because
shout out Rick Bengal, by the way, because this guy, he comments on YouTube almost every show.
Yeah.
So he's an everydayer. Rick Bengal's an everydayer. Shout out to you. It's not always great what he says. Doesn't always love us, but he always listens, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. So he first commented saying how much he loves the show. Comments almost every day. He wanted to mention how big of a fan he was from Halifax. He is from Halifax, and he makes sure to go and see Patrick Waugh when he coaches in Halifax.
The Mooseheads.
He is wondering, why isn't Leafs Nation clamoring for a coach of his ilk? Exactly what the Leafs need. 3 exclamation marks, or I think 4. Your opinions. Don't you think Patrick Waugh would love hoisting the cup in Toronto? And to end it, he says, it's just another way to stick it to Montreal.
Well, yes, that would be a great way to stick it to Montreal if he can help Toronto win a Stanley Cup. I'm curious what he means by it's exactly of his ilk. I'm going to
add to that because he does. Again, we only have a limit of how many how much we can put in each of these in everything here. So I'll read some of the reasons why he believes so. Patrick runs a very lively bench. He is constantly collaborating and is a very, very hands-on. He's very hands-on. His players would run through a brick wall for him. He has his Ramparts playing all very connected all over the ice. They're disciplined and focused. In my opinion, Waugh is a bigger star than the core 4 combined. I believe he brings a pedigree that this group would need in Toronto. He understands with the young player mindset, and he won Coach of the Year in Colorado when he was there.
You know, I don't hate it, actually.
I don't hate the idea of Patrick Waugh.
I don't hate the idea of Patrick Waugh. And something that he just mentioned that actually, what part do you think stuck out to me?
The fact that he's a bigger star than the core 4?
Yeah.
So nobody would be below in a way that
no one's above the team.
Mike Babcock, the star coach that would rein in the egos. Maybe is that what he's trying to say? He's the one that's going to get these guys to kind of no one's going to make Patrick outshine Patrick Waugh in a way.
Right. Patrick Waugh is not apologizing to the elite players when they don't play elite.
No.
He's just not doing that. He's going to flat out say, these guys played like garbage. They need to be better. And guess what's going to happen the next day? Nothing. We're all just going to accept it. The player's going to accept it because that's just the way it is. And when you're told by a Hockey Hall of Famer they're playing like garbage, it might ring a little more than it does when Sheldon Keefe tells you. I think Keefe's a great coach, but when it comes to, his pedigree, he's not a Hall of Famer, right? His playing pedigree, he was, a grinder. He was a depth grinder. Smart guy. I think he's a good coach. I don't necessarily think that that he's been the problem here in Toronto. So clamoring for a new coach, I don't think is necessarily the camp that I'm in. I don't think that I would be upset if the coach returned. That being said, do I think that Patrick Roy would be a good fit if they were to move on? I think that there would be. I think that there could be fits with Patrick Roy. I think when you look at, so he just won the Memorial Cup with the Quebec Ramparts. And if you watch the way that team played, they were extremely well structured, played well defensively, and to Rick's point, they did play connected and they played their asses off for this guy. So you do like to see when he can connect with the youth that way. He should be able to connect to the NHLers. Right. And having that Hall of Fame stature, you would think that potentially these core four players will kind of respect the way that he goes about things. And maybe that does, instead of make it about the core four, does make it about the team. I wouldn't hate it. I'll say that.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. I also just wonder, when he was in Colorado, if you don't remember, he didn't only want to be the coach. He basically wanted to be the boss and have all the decisions. So
yeah,
you'll have to wonder how much.
Which he basically did when he got to Quebec too. Like with the Ramparts, like he's coach and GM. He owns the team. Like he basically became the boss.
He's the captain. He runs the ship.
That said, I think he did interview for the Columbus job, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he interviewed or plans on interviewing for the Ranger job. So there's a possibility that Patrick Roy could find himself back in the NHL. Whether or not it's with Toronto, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's high odds of that being the case. But it would be an interesting situation if it were to come to fruition. All right, let's get to the next one here. Malfrere.
All right, we're going to go with Mario L. What free agent should the Leafs go after this offseason?
Ooh, which free agent? Do you have an answer for us, Dave, off the top of your dome?
I do, right away. One, Ivan Barbashev.
Oh, you're referring to Ivan Barbashev, who blew up Radko Gudas in Game 2.
Yeah, just for the fact that he blew up Radko Gudas, I want him on the Leafs. Like, it doesn't even, not even anything else but that reason.
That reason alone is why he needs to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. That's.
He's also a very good hockey player.
He is a good, yes, he is a very good hockey player. Yeah, I mean, I think Ivan Barbashev would be a good one. I was actually shooting it with a buddy of mine, seeing. We're going back and forth on what we think that he would be worth. Like what type of number would you throw at Ivan Barbashev to bring him to Toronto, though? Because that's the ultimate question. Can they afford him? What number would you sign him at?
I think that number is going to start over 4, in my opinion.
100%. I would be surprised if that trickled up to 5 flat. Wouldn't surprise me.
Like if you're talking about signing an Ivan Barbashev over Michael Bunting for that number, I'm taking Barbashev any day. And he's making 2.25 right now. So if you're doubling his salary, I would be okay with that because he is I think he's been a very underrated player for Vegas in the playoffs. I think he has like 16 points in 18 games. May have even had more after that dropping on Florida. Like he brings that element that I think the Leafs need up front because he can do it in a top 6 role. Like the Leafs added guys that brought some, piss and vinegar, as Mike likes to say, but he can also do other things really well, like put up points. He had 16 points in 23 games to end the regular season with Vegas. This is a guy that can, if you're putting him in the top 6, he will flourish in Toronto. I think he would be another one of those like unheralded players that would get a lot of love from Leafs Nation if the Leafs could sign him.
Yeah, I think he would. I'm trying to see where is he in terms of. He is a UFA, right?
He is, yes.
I don't know why he's not showing up on the cap friendly list of guys. Maybe because he's still in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's probably why. But yeah, he signed a 2-year deal back in 2021. So
this is a very weak free agent class. I will say that. It's not the great. Oh, you know why? Because this is no, actually, I know exactly why he's not showing up. Because I put signing status as UFA instead of expiring status as UFA. So his last deal was, yeah, okay, that makes more sense. I'm like, where are all these
He was an
players?
RFA when he signed his deal.
Yeah, exactly. All right, now we got it. He is definitely a UFA. Yeah, like I'm just taking a look at the list of guys now who are out there and who are available for the Maple Leafs, and I'm leaning towards, I want Toronto to maybe go after a defenseman potentially. Who that defenseman is a good question. I do know that in the past there's been some links to Damon Severson, but that was back in the Kyle Dubas era. So now I am curious if those how much of those links to the past will kind of come back at this point. I'm not sure. Maybe Tyler Bertuzzi would actually be a pretty good name to keep
He
an
was
eye on.
another
I
name
think.
I was looking at too.
Yeah, he'd be a good name to keep an eye on for sure. I mean, does Patrick Kane, does Showtime want to come to Toronto? I'm sure, we could figure something out in Toronto for him. But I think Ivan Barbashev is a really, really, really solid one. Actually, Dmitry Orlov's a free agent too. Orlov would be a nice pickup for the Maple Leafs for sure. 31 years old, so he's a little on the older side, but played really well for Boston when he got traded from Washington. So maybe Dmitry Orlov as a defenseman that they could pick up potentially. So there are some names for you, Mario. You're welcome. Next one. What do we want to get to next?
Let's go with.
Actually, while you're finding out where you want to go next, why don't we tell the good folks listening and watching to the podcast about our good friends at eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for the green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply. Exclusions apply. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We put out new podcasts each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, all the way through until the end of June, and then throughout the offseason. We still got pods coming to you. We just drop it down to 3 days a week. So we still got content all throughout the offseason, 3 days a week. So if you want to be kept up to date of what's going on around Leafs Nation and around the NHL, make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Leafs podcast. Dave, let's get to another one of our mailbag questions. Let's see what the people want to know.
All right, we're gonna go back to the Discord. Canadian Ranger. With Caulfield signing at $7.85 million per year, how does that set the bar for Willie to ask for 8.5 plus? Well, the fact that he's scored 40 goals and Cole Caulfield has not scored 40 goals pretty much sets him up for a pretty decent payday, in my opinion. I also like William Nylander. Like you're talking about how little talent is available on the free agent market this year. Next year, he's going to probably be if he gets to that point, he will be one of the top guys on a lot of teams' lists that are looking for goal scoring. Like I like, and that makes him, he can say I want 8.5, and he probably would get that. Like if you're looking at the cap going up, potentially $4 million in the year that he's going to be a UFA.
If Willie asks for 8.5, you sign that in a heartbeat. By the way, if he says my number is 8.5, you say where do I sign?
Exactly.
Because Willie at 8.5 is a steal. It's an absolute steal. Because first of all, Caulfield signing as a RFA, so not much right, especially coming out of his ELC. Willie can walk. Like there's 31 other teams next season that can negotiate with this guy. So if you can get him at 8.5, that's only a measly $1.5 million increase from what he's making now for the production that William Nylander can give you. The only one of these core four who's been a playoff performer. You 1,000% sign him at that contract. But unfortunately, I think it's probably going to cost a little more than $8.5 million to get this guy signed.
Number for Nylander? Like if Nylander, if you were to say to Nylander, what's like give us your number. What's the number you're going to say is justifiable to re-sign him at?
I don't know if I go past 9.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like,
I don't know if
what's Rantanen getting? Because like that would be like my you're going past Rantanen.
Yeah, it's just for me. It's I think I'm looking at this deal and I just don't know if you can afford to go past 9. Like the structure as is already quite out of whack for this team. When it comes to like how much they're paying their forwards. And at this point, like you're going into the next 2 years where you've got Matthews, Marner, and Nylander all up for contract extensions. You got to think that each and every one of them are going to sit there and say, yeah, we want more money than the first time. So you're going to be giving more money to these guys than what they just had. So I think like 9, maybe 9.5. I would not touch 10. No. If he says I want 10 or I walk, I think you trade him this summer, actually, is what you do.
Yes.
You have to. You trade him this summer and say, all right, well, if you're not going to, entertain our offer between 8 and 9 million, sorry, we're going to have to part ways because that's not going to fit into our structure. And you try and get something for him. That's probably how you go about things this summer if that's how the conversation goes.
No, that's very fair. I just think, you have to, you're going to be you're going to be giving Austin Matthews a sizable deal. You've already got sizable deals with Marner and Tavares. You just have to tell Willie, we'll pay you, but you also have to understand where the pecking order, Matthews is going to be number 1 still, and we can only pay you so much.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's do this one. Olli Jokinen with hair. Another
one
Discord.
Of my on the Discord.
Another Discord legend. Olli Jokinen with hair. Do you think the Leafs tried opening their win now window a few years early? I'm assuming this is referring to the Tavares contract.
1,000%. That's where it started.
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. If they didn't have to make that deal, it was a luxury signing at the time, and it really screwed them up in terms of how they were going to structure the rest of their contracts, because you had Marner and Tavares, or Marner and Matthews, who were flat out just better players than Tavares was at that point in their careers. And unfortunately, that meant that they were going to get paid more than John Tavares. And look what ended up transpiring. You're paid relatively similar to what Tavares made. And that's kind of what transpired here, and allowed Austin and allowed Mitch to go out there and ask for that money. So yeah, I think that they did kind of extend their win window a little bit early. And now here we are, and it's like, oh, there's a new general manager. How much longer is this window? You could say, well, they got 1 more year of Austin Matthews and Nylander, and then after that, there's 1 more year of Tavares and Marner, and then what happens, right? So the window's getting shorter, that's for sure.
So what I also say is at what point does a team not take the chance to go and sign good players, right? I understand the luxury, and it was a lot of money.
I will say this. I think it's the type of player that they signed.
Yes,
that was the problem. Right.
I have no problem if you want to do your best to move to move the team forward. It's just you had Nazem Kadri as your second line center. It was a decent second line center.
Keeping that money available for a bona fide defenseman would have been the smart play. Like when that defenseman showed up on the market, that you could go after him. Alex Pietrangelo, 2 years later, showed up on the market. Maybe he was in the next summer. No, I think it was 2 years later. Showed up on the market. And you didn't have the money to give. You just didn't have it. But you could have, if you didn't make that move and you didn't, do that too aggressively a little too early. Could have waited around and got a better player, a better deal. And didn't happen, obviously. And here we are now with this albatross of an $11 million contract and a guy who wears the C on his sweater and has more than 50% of his points coming on the man advantage, which is not a sexy statistic.
No, not sexy at all when you consider how much it impinges on them, their ability to add around and adding the depth that a lot of these Stanley Cup playoff teams, like Vegas, they only got 2 guys making over $10 million. And it helps them have a team that's really, really deep.
Right. All right, let's take one more quick break. When we get back, let's answer a couple more questions here, Dave. If we don't get to your question, we'll keep it in the drafts. And when we do our next mailbag here, probably ahead of the draft and free agency, we'll make sure that we get to it then as well. So if we don't answer your question today, or you didn't see yesterday's, maybe we answered on yesterday's part 1 podcast potentially. We will get to it a little bit later on in a couple of weeks when we do another mailbag. But why don't we take one last break here? And when we get back, we'll finish up a couple more of these mailbag questions. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You listen to Locked On Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. Locked On Leafs, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. Make sure that you are subscribed wherever you get your podcast, also up on YouTube as well. We got daily content coming out Monday through Friday, all the way through till the end of the month, and then even 3 days a week come summertime throughout the offseason. So we never stop working to get the best and newest Leafs news to all y'all. All right. Let's continue.
Let's go with
another one of these, Dave.
Let's go with the quick one here. We're going to go back to Ollie Jokinen with hair. Why has nobody taken Justin Holl's security clearance to the arena? Why hasn't it been taken away? Well,
how do we know it hasn't been taken away?
That's the first one there. And also, July 1st will come. Don't worry. It'll be taken away by then.
Do you think there is a 0% chance Justin Holl is a Maple Leaf next summer or next season?
I'm just wondering if it was a Sheldon Keefe wanted to keep him around or Kyle Dubas wanted to keep him around. Probably Keefe, so I can't put 0 because I feel like he's going to if he's there, he's going to make the biggest pitch to keep Justin Holl around. I just hope some other team offers him such a good deal that he can't refuse it, and the Leafs are just.
And I think he will. Like he's going to get offered he'll get offered like 2.5 times 3 or something, for sure. Some team will offer.
I hope Brad goes, Sheldon. We tried, but there was just a better offer out there, and he decided to take that one.
Yep. All right.
Thank you, Oli, for that one. And let's go with a YouTube one from John D. What would you expect in return from 1, Nylander, 2, Marner, 3, Matthews, 4, Tavares, 5, any combination of 2 of them? No movement clause and no trade clause are possible to move with player approval.
Ooh. There's a lot to unpack on this one.
Yeah,
I'll say that. Generally, we kind of discussed it on yesterday's show a bit too. I would expect for them to get impact players in return. Right? You're not trading for picks and prospects. That's not what's happening with any of these guys. You got to get impact players. And I believe that if you're trading one of these guys, why don't you do it for, trade from your surplus of your star forwards and get a defenseman in return, a star defenseman in return. That to me is what I would expect in return for one of these guys. I do not see any situation where you can even entertain trading 2 of them. Also, like that's just bananas. The amount of money they make, I don't think even makes it possible anyway. But that would be my answer to this question. I would expect for them to get an impact top pair defenseman at least for any of these 3 guys. I guess Tavares maybe. I don't know how that goes, but for Nylander, Marner, or Matthews, got to get a top end defenseman in return.
Yeah, I think you do, and it's going to be tough because you have to find a willing trade partner. But I think there's going to be teams that are going to also need that impact forward, and I think that they're going to see that the Leafs do have them. And I think a deal could be done. It's just you have to be very, very smart about, how much you're taking back too, right? Like the salaries are going to have to match up in a lot of ways for a lot of these deals too.
Just taking a look right now to see who are some of the some of the defensemen around the league. Charlie McAvoy is an interesting name for me as well. If you're making a deal, and I don't know if Toronto and Boston could come up with a trade here, but Charlie McAvoy is a guy where it's like, okay, you can part with a Nylander, you might be able to part with a Marner if McAvoy's like the main piece coming back the other way. Could you imagine if you had McAvoy to this blue line? I don't see it happening. I'm just saying that is a name that would be in the same stratosphere as those guys. There's not a lot of players where you could look at it and see, a 1-for-1 or a package deal that would work. But that might be one right there.
Yeah, like that's sort of the type of defenseman. Like I know somebody once brought up the name to me, Colton Parayko, and I would have liked the Colton Parayko, but I don't like his contract.
I would have liked Colton Parayko 3 years ago. Colton Parayko now, not so much. Not so much. Noah Hannafin's interesting. Like I've seen a lot of people throw out Noah Hannafin's name, and obviously he was traded for by Brad Treliving once before, so that is definitely would be an interesting name to keep an eye on. Rasmus Anderson potentially. Obviously, that would not be a Marner situation, but like these are just defensemen that I'm now thinking about potentially Treliving could trade for, and that's what I think would need to happen for any of those guys to get moved. I think we had time for maybe one more, maybe two, if we can keep it quick.
All right. Here, let's go with the one from Discord. Blue 13. Out of the UFAs who may not be brought back, which player or players will be the most disappointing to see not return? Or who would be disappointed to not see return?
This is so basically like, who do I prioritize as my top free agents? And if they did not figure out a deal, who would I be most disappointed? So, I mean, the top free agent, I guess, that's out there for the Maple Leafs is Ryan O'Reilly. That said, I wouldn't be disappointed if they didn't bring him back. I'm not expecting Ryan O'Reilly to return to Toronto, so I'm not going to put him on this list. But somebody that I would actually put would be Luke Schenn. I think that Luke Schenn is someone who certainly has won over a lot of Leaf fans. Look at the way that he and Morgan Rielly played in the playoffs. And, man, this guy was really, really good. So, and he brought out the best in Mo as well. And I think that's extremely valuable in itself for someone to bring out the best in Morgan Rielly. So, for that reason, I think probably the most disappointed player for the Leafs not to bring back would be Luke Schenn. Maybe David Kampf also. Like I think Kampf has been a really solid player for this Maple Leafs team for the last couple of years. If they don't bring him back and he ends up leaving for like a similar contract, like a digestible contract, that would be a little upsetting. Where it's like, really, it's like you couldn't have given that. Like if he signed somewhere for $2 million, I'm like, I might have been able to stomach that. Like, no, he couldn't make it work here. But I would say, so Luke Schenn and David Kampf would be the guys for me.
Yeah, I think Noel Acciari is another one too.
Yeah.
That if the Leafs didn't bring him back, it'd be a little disappointing. Luke Schenn, David Kampf, and yeah, I think that's really it because everyone like Zach Aston Reese, he can go if they don't bring him back. Like,
yeah, take him or leave him.
Alexander Kerfoot, not disappointed one bit if he doesn't.
Justin Holl, I'd be so upset.
Oh yeah, Mike. I would have to console Mike for 10 minutes and then realize he is gone. Yeah, I think
they should re-sign. They should re-sign Pierre Engvall though. By the way, he is a UFA.
Yeah, but he would have to be on the team for you to re-sign.
They should sign Pierre Engvall in free agency then.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get smart with me. Don't get smart with me, David. Don't get smart with me. You know what I meant?
That's what I do.
All right. I think we have time for one more before I get overly delirious getting into my Italian mafia accents.
Okay. Let's go with. Let's see. All right. Blue 13 again, because I like this one. If you were the GM and the MLSD board sent down a demand to move one of the core players to bring in a substantial fresh change, who are you picking and why?
I am picking Mitch Marner. I'm picking Mitch Marner because A, pretty big contract. B, I think he could bring you a big return. And most importantly, he's proven to me year after year that he shrinks in the playoffs. And that is a big concern that I have. He shows me in the regular season, you know, a successful path to playing in the playoffs. But then when push comes to shove, when the pressure is on, he doesn't get it done. And I hate to say it because the dude was so good. We're talking about a 99-point Selke candidate, but ultimately, of the big three there, Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, we'll put Tavares to the side right now. Marner, I think, is the one guy where it's like I believe he might have to go. He might not be able to play the necessary style that's needed to win the playoffs. And if I'm watching, what we're watching right now with Vegas and Florida, dude, these are physical series. And if Marner's not willing to play with that type of physicality and go to the net and fight through contact the way that he wasn't really doing in the Florida series, when's he going to do that? Because he's 26 or going to be 26. Like, he's been in the NHL for 6-7 years. You would think that light bulb would have went off already, and it hasn't. So I think that for those reasons, Mitch Marner would be the guy that I would probably look to move on from.
And you're looking at the players playing in the Stanley Cup final right now. It's not even their play on the ice, it's their demeanor off the ice. And I just don't know if Marner has the demeanor to lift this Leafs team in the way that I think they need it. Like, you hear him talk about how we don't care what's being said out, outside of the room. We don't care what the media is saying. That to me speaks a lot, because they should care, because what the media is saying isn't totally off, right? He's trying to make it seem like things are being made up and all those things. I see how, like, a Matthew Tkachuk is condoning himself. I'm looking at Jack Eichel, a guy that nobody thought could win when he was in Buffalo. Now he is on his way to potentially winning a Stanley Cup here in Vegas, right? Like, I just think you need that demeanor off the ice too, and I don't know if Mitch Marner has it.
You know what's really weird about it, though? He has that demeanor on the defensive side of the ice, but then not on the offensive side of the ice. Like, he doesn't like assert his dominance offensively the way that he's able to, first of all, and the way that he does defensively when he's stripping pucks off of guys, when he's blocking shots, getting in lanes. He closes on you pretty quick. He suffocates you, especially when he's killing penalties. But then for some reason, when the playoff comes, he's not as assertive offensively as he is in his own end. It's kind of bizarre. I don't know. I just kind of thought about it right now. But, like, I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, you understand what I'm getting at there? It's kind of bizarre.
I understand you want to show how good you are defensively, but you're also being paid close to $11 million to be a really good offensive player, and that has not happened in the playoffs.
Yeah,
right?
Well, it's just like, a reminder, just because you brought up Jack Eichel, and like, this guy's been a two-way force, and his defensive game has really developed in the last couple of years, or this season more so, I guess you could say. And it's like, well, that defensive ability's always been in Mitch Marner, and that hasn't necessarily been the problem in the playoffs either. He hasn't let his offensive struggles, he hasn't allowed his defensive game to slip all that much, although there was some weird things that were going on in that Florida series. But for the most part, it hadn't slipped over the last couple of seasons. And, for some reason, offensively, just has not been able to get it done. But I don't know. That's a big question that obviously MLSE does have to answer at some point here. So we'll see what the answer is. And maybe the answer is none. We'll run it back. And honestly, at this point, based on what I've heard so far, that sounds very likely. Very likely that they could run it back with the same core four and the same coach. Love it or not, it seems like that might be the situation for the Maple Leafs this next season.
And
Does it work? Stay tuned. Guess we'll find out next year. All right, buddy. Good stuff. There is what we got. Four more that we didn't get to. All from the Discord. We did get to some of theirs. Like this is like Blue 13 and Canadian Ranger gave us like 5 questions each, which is amazing. Thank you so much to those guys in the Discord. But we'll get to the rest of these questions at a later date. So we appreciate everybody for submitting them. If you missed yesterday's show and you didn't hear your question, perhaps we got to it yesterday. So go check out that podcast, obviously. And hopefully we did answer your question to the best of our abilities if you did hear it on today's show. That'll do it for us here on the podcast. I'd like to thank everybody for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well. Go ahead, smash that like button if you're watching here on YouTube. Comment down below. Let us know your thoughts to some of the questions that we had tasked for us to answer today. Let us know down below in the comment section. I'll be back with another episode for y'all tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.